And good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another Art to Market broadcast with Barney Davy of artmarketingnews.com and me, Jason Horsch, owner of XanaduGallery.com. Today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2015, and this is an Ask Us Anything session. Glad to have you all on board, and good to have you here, Barney. Good to be together with you again.
Hi, Jason. Good to see you once again, and hi to everybody out there listening in live or on a recording. It is good to be with you once again, and tomorrow's tax day.
Yeah, so we're kind of celebrating that, right? Because it's so awesome.
I guess in some, I don't know how it's awesome. It's something I'd rather not do, but I guess it's one of those things like they said, you can't get out of there.
Yeah, so good to have you all here. And for those of you who maybe are somewhat new to following Barney and I, we do these broadcasts every second Tuesday of the month. And every quarter or so, we try to do a session that is open to questions and discussion based on topics that the audience sets. Rather than coming up with our own discussion points. And so this is one of those sessions. And already we've gotten a lot of great questions in. If you're listening to this live and want to ask additional questions, you can do that in a couple different ways. In the video box, if you're logged into Google, you should see a Q&A button. Click on that and you can type a question in, which we'll see in a chat window. If you're on my blog, red.blog.com, there is a chat window there that you can type questions into, or you can email us if you've got our email addresses, and we'll keep an eye on the inbox there as well. But already we've got probably more questions than we can answer in the time that we have set aside today, but we'll try and get to as many of your questions as we can. So Barney and I have kind of been combing through the questions that have come in ahead of time. Barney, did you have any that you wanted to pick to start the discussion with today?
Sure, I'll go first. You got an email from Patty Christensen Woodward asking, do you have a personal history or feedback from artists that are using Square or PayPal readers for credit card payments? Any info about the customer service side? Jason, you may have heard more from artists than I have. I know a lot of artists who use Square. I don't know as many who use PayPal. I think PayPal has some slight advantage financially. As far as using, I've used both of them personally and found them both to be fairly easy and got my money right away. So from a tech point of view, I think it's a personal preference. I'd look to see, I'm personally using the Square right now because they sent me a promo, and if I tweeted out and got some people to sign up for Square, I think it only took one. They gave me 0% interest off for up to $1,000 over, and I have to take that in over the next 6 months. So that was hard to refuse. That's a nice 3% bump on the first 1,000 I bring in. If any of you want to spend $1,000 with me tonight, let's talk. But I know you've used the Square in the past, Jason. Do you have any personal thoughts?
Yeah, I also have used both Square and PayPal, and I know I've heard some artists who are using the Quicken or QuickBooks version. There are a number of different readers out there now, and I think you're right, Barney. In the early days, sometimes one would work better than the other, depending on where you were located or your internet connection on your phone. I think that all of those companies have kind of worked out the kinks now. So it's more who you're comfortable with in terms of the customer service relationship. And in addition to what you mentioned, Barney, the percentages, it's also good to pay attention to how these companies deal with disputes. That's probably going to be one of the big areas. If you're ever going to have any interaction with a company, it's going to be in the dispute space. I have had occasion in the past to work through PayPal's dispute process. And it's been fine. I thought that they resolved it fairly. And I have not had the opportunity to do that with Square. I've never had an issue with Square where someone disputed a charge. So I would suggest that you might want to look over their dispute policies and just make sure you're comfortable with that. But otherwise, if you're out doing art shows and festivals or selling to clients directly, to me, it's just a no-brainer that you definitely want one or both of these services. I carry around both the readers for when I go out to clients' homes to make art sales, just in case one doesn't happen to be working that day. I can switch over to the other one. And the readers are free. They don't cost you. Neither of the services cost you anything unless you use them. And so you might as well sign up for both.
They both give you the option to practice swiping the card too, which is a good idea. You don't want to try to learn on the job while you're at a show and trying to take payments, especially if you have more than one person that you're trying to work on at a time. You want to be able to do this efficiently. I think Square, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that Square now has an option where you can actually take a payment offline, and then as soon as you're able to connect back to the network, again, the payment will be uploaded into the into your Square account. And I'm not sure that PayPal has that. So that's a nice feature to know, that if you are in an area where you're not getting good cell phone connection, that you could still take that payment and get the sale without having to jump through more hoops.
Excellent. So I think we've covered that one. Beat that one up. Let's jump to another one. This question is coming from, I've just got a first name here, Cindy. She said, I've gotten the idea that I need to shut down the e-commerce section of my website. I'll redo my site this weekend, but then I've gotten the impression from us, Barney, from our broadcast and stuff, that blogging and marketing yourself is okay with galleries if the artists sell on Etsy, etc. It's my impression, is my impression correct? Oh, I misread that. So I think summarizing the question is, and this is something we've discussed before, is where does an artist where are the lines drawn in terms of the online marketplace? How much marketing should an artist be doing online? How much should they be doing in terms of direct sales on a website or through Etsy or other services? And especially if you're thinking about relationships with galleries, what are the considerations to take into play there? And so, Barney, maybe I'll let you take a first crack at that, and then I've got some ideas about it as well, obviously.
Well, first of all, I believe that artists need to sell any way they can, and direct, there's nothing better than that, because you're going to be the biggest margin. You're still going to have some expenses that would normally be covered by a gallery or some other distribution channel, but you have a direct relationship with that customer as well when you sell to them direct. I think if you're going to have a website, you might as well have e-commerce on it, because it's a 24/7 option or opportunity for you to make sales. Maybe you won't make a lot of sales online. It depends on all kinds of different things: the price of your art, how much traffic you're driving to the site, any number of things. But not having your site e-commerce enabled is putting yourself at a disadvantage when you don't need to. Why miss a potential sale because you didn't have some way to let somebody buy something from you online? And I understand when you are selling both direct and working with galleries, there is potential for conflict. To me, the easiest way is don't put anything online that's in a gallery, unless you are going to just specifically put that piece online and say it's available at Xanadu Gallery, and give the instructions or the link to how to get to Xanadu Gallery, and let Xanadu, in that case, make the sale and pay them the commission. I know some artists who pay the commission to galleries anyway. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go or not. The main thing is have a consistent approach to what you're doing. Be open about it and let everybody know, like your gallery, for instance, what you're doing. And if you're all on the same page, you shouldn't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I am also going to kind of take that same route. And I think the the reason this is a confusing question, Cindy, is because it's a confusing topic. We're still really still in the infancy of figuring out the internet and its effect on the art market. As Barney said, there's opportunity there that you certainly would not want to pass up. And as a gallery owner myself, I've had many discussions with the artists that I'm working with, and talking about, what is the appropriate posture for an artist who is showing in galleries, but also has a website. And, every gallery owner is going to have a little different idea. Some are going to be on the draconian end of the spectrum saying, no, you can't even have a website. I want all the sales and traffic to come through me, and I want to handle all of that. We've already seen the galleries that are taking that approach. We've seen their business suffer, and I think a lot of them have either gone out of business or have had to change their stance, because it's just clear that an artist is going to need to take advantage of that opportunity to promote themselves online. And on the other end, and I like to think I'm more towards this end, I look at the internet as an enhancement of my marketing efforts. And I hope that, as an artist is promoting herself or himself, that those efforts are going to be good for all of us. And I've already seen that to be the case with, some of my best artists who do have an internet presence and are selling directly. They're generating relationships that, that client may never have been into my gallery, or may never in the future be into my gallery, were it not for the relationship that was generated online, and the familiarity that they get with the artist's work. So, not to make it more convoluted and more confusing, but I think it's just a little bit of a balancing act that you as an artist are going to play with your galleries, and be open and communicative with them. Let them know, look, I do have a website. I am marketing there. What are your feelings about it? What's your approach with your other artists? And just try to work together to come to a conclusion. A couple of other key considerations before we move on to another one. As long as the pricing isn't varying dramatically, if you're showing your work at the same prices that the work would be showing in the galleries, and as long as you've got your gallery contact information and you're trying to ascertain where interest is coming from, your gallery should be willing to work with you and let you have your website, or that's maybe not even the right way to say it. That they're going to learn how to interact and navigate with your website, promoting your work as well as their efforts.
When you're marketing online, you're building a reputation, you're creating your own following, you're building an email list. You bring marketing muscle to the situation that you didn't have in the past. It was all on the gallery in the past. Now an artist can step up and do their own promotion for some kind of joint thing, like an artist show or something like that, one-person show or whatever the case might be, and actually add some value in that way, in that they're bringing their own customers into the equation. And just to add a little bit more on the pricing, because some artists think that, well, I'm paying a gallery 50%, I can just, still charge a little bit over 50%, and I'm doing well. Well, you're not really, because if you're selling the art yourself, you have all kinds of expenses that the gallery incurred to begin with. And more importantly, you're wrecking your pricing integrity with the gallery and your potential or buyers, and making it really hard for going forward in the future for somebody to decide what's the real value of your art. You're selling it half off here and full price here. What is this stuff worth? So having pricing integrity just will help you in so many ways, especially in this way. It'll fatten your wallet. Don't give money away. If it's worth $2,000 in a gallery, it's worth $2,000 on your website. Is it up to me to pull up a question here?
Yeah, if you want to pull up the next one.
back and forth. Okay, here we go. Speaking about galleries, what does a gallery do about pieces that need to be framed or that a collector wants reframed as part of the purchase? Surely you don't pay retail framing rates. What's the custom? Do you have a relationship with a frame shop and get some pre-negotiated discount in what amount or something like that? I'm assuming the cost of the frame is almost always borne up front by the gallery rather than make your artist purchase frames before consigning. Ted Hoffman. I would disagree, Ted. I think most galleries that I'm familiar with that show framed art, and there's a trend away from framed art in a lot of galleries, particularly those that are selling more contemporary work. But in the galleries that I'm familiar with, they expected the artist to provide a finished product, meaning that when you ship the art to me, it's ready to go on the wall, and that means if it has a frame, that the artist paid for the frame, and it's built into the price of the negotiated price of whatever they're working, the artist and the gallery are working on. Your question about pieces that need to be reframed, that's a little trickier. I think that would probably come down to be a specific negotiation between the gallery, possibly the buyer, and the artist. I don't know, Jason, do you have a policy for handling situations like that? Are you there, Jason? Okay, I can't hear Jason. Can you hear me, Jason? Your microphone is off.
Can you hear me now, Barney?
I can, yes.
There we go. For some reason my microphone decided to just blink out on me. So coming back to that question of framing, I'll first just throw in my 2 cents that yes, galleries by and large, unless they have a framing operation that they're operating themselves and are trying to make an additional profit that way. Otherwise, almost every gallery is going to want you to provide your work already framed, ready to hang. And on the occasion where a client may want to reframe the piece, typically I will let my client use his or her own framer, just in an effort to keep things as simple as possible. And in that case, I may give them a slight discount to allow for the framing costs. In other words, they're not buying the frame. That frame would then go back to the artist for the artist to use on a future piece. Now, in an instance where a client says, oh, I want a new frame, but I don't have any framer that I'm working with, can you help me? I do have relationships with several different framers in the area. Yes, they do offer a professional discount to the trade, which I then just pass on to my client. So I may either just make arrangements for the client to go meet with the framer, or I may go out with the client to the frame shop and help them select the frame. But in essence, that happens very rarely. Most of the time, the artist frames the piece, delivers it to the gallery, the client sees it, likes it, buys it, the frame stays on it, and that's 99%, I would say, of those sales. So not a huge issue that you're going to run into. You just need to be aware that you want to be picking the highest quality framing and the framing that does the best job of enhancing your frames before you provide the work to the gallery.
That is something that it's tempting, I think, to go on the cheap on the framing, since it's part of the cost that the artist is bearing, at least initially, and that's a mistake. There are ways to get inexpensive framing or less expensive framing, I'll say, if you shop around. There are ways to do it, but don't go with cheap framing materials that don't enhance the art. The frame is there to enhance the art. If it's a bad framing job, or if it's just obviously cheap framing, it's going to distract from the art and devalue it and make it harder to sell. Just have more respect for your art. Even if it pinches the wallet a little bit initially, you're still going to be able to pass along the full price of whatever you pay for the framing. And on the other hand too, don't go for some kind of an elaborate compo frame that's enormously expensive and 4 times worth the price of the art. Find that sweet spot, that middle ground. But for sure, don't go on the cheap side. You'll pay for it in the long run in a bad way.
Yeah, your art ultimately is worth what you're willing to invest in it and the perceived value. And so, absolutely, materials and framing, you want to make sure that you're making as much investment as you possibly can into getting the highest quality materials and presentation. I've got a question here from Nancy Noose, and this is a question that I think, if I don't get it in exactly this way, I hear it from a lot of artists, and it's a little bit of just frustration, and understandably so. And I'm going to just summarize Nancy's question. But she says basically she gets a lot of likes and compliments about her paintings from friends and strangers. She gets accepted into juried shows, and even will occasionally get a prize, but doesn't really get any sales. And she says that if she looks over the last 6 years, she's had a total of $1,700 in sales, less than $300 per year. And after all of her marketing efforts, it's easy to get, obviously easy to get dispirited. This is understandable, but what I would encourage Nancy is not to get frustrated. Instead, I'd encourage you to get a plan and start pushing out. And what this tells me is that all of the efforts that you've been doing so far, your Pinterest, eBay, Etsy, Facebook, the shows that you're participating in, either they're not the right venues for you or you're taking the wrong approach. And by all means, I would suggest that whatever you're doing right now, do something different. Find a new strategy, because there's just, doing the same thing year after year, and attempt after attempt and not getting the results tells you that you've got to really mix it up and do something different. And obviously there's so many different areas that we could talk about in terms of what needs to change, what needs to be fixed. Is it the quality of your presentation? Is it your consistency or subject matter? And without going in depth into what you're doing, it's hard to know what the answer is. But my suggestion is that you look to come up with a plan and say, I'm going to try to find different venues that get more buyers. I'm going to be working on creating a consistent body of work, and I'm going to be working on getting much more exposure than I'm currently getting. And those 3 things, if I look at an artist, it's those 3 things that tend to make the biggest difference in terms of ramping up sales: consistency, exposure, and showing in the right venues.
Couldn't disagree with any of those. There's a phrase that I picked up somewhere recently, and it goes easy. The path is through the math. And it's true for anything, whether you're selling art or baby food or anything else. You have to have way more exposure to potential buyers than you, especially for artists who possibly haven't been in business and marketing before, to realize that if I want to sell a piece of art, I can't just show it to 5 people and hope somebody's going to buy it. That'd be great if you could sell 20% of everybody that you showed your art to, but that's not the real world. You need to show your art to a lot more people than 20, a lot more people than 100. Even on Facebook, you can get out and have your art be seen by thousands of people, and I would argue that's probably a waste of your time in general. I don't think people buy from strangers online. I just don't. I think I got an email and it turned into a blog post a few months ago. And the question, it might have even been on Twitter, came through Twitter. The question was, what is the best way for artists to get found online? And I replied back, that's the wrong question. The question is, what is the best way for artists to find collectors online? You have to completely turn the mentality around. If you're sitting back, just putting some nice pictures up online and having some few conversations with people on Facebook or whatever you're doing, and you're not actively going out and trying to determine who are your best prospects, developing some kind of relationship with them that's meaningful so they actually know who you are, that's how you begin to make sales. You just can't sit back and wait for things to happen. It won't, unless you can ramp up and really just get tens of thousands of views on your art one way or another, and that's not realistic. That's a hard way to go. It's an expensive way to go. The better way is dial it in, do the things that Jason is selling you. First and foremost, your art has to be something that people want to buy, and for some artists, that's a tough thing. I look at art sometimes that artists show me and they ask me what they think, and it's really hard to be diplomatic because I'm looking at it thinking, you don't have a good shot at selling this. It's not really professional enough, or doesn't have the kind of commercial quality to get you the sort of sales that you want. And that, I'm not saying, I have no idea what Nancy's artwork looks like, but not all art is equal, and you need to be able to have somebody who's in a position to look at your art and tell you, you're on the right path, where you really need to do a few different things here in order to get this to the point where it would be commercially viable, if that's what you're trying to do, to build a career, to start selling art on a more regular basis. So that's a hard fact to live with. It's sort of like somebody telling you, you can barely carry a tune. May be painful because you spent 1,000 hours trying to learn how to sing and it's not working. It might be that you just need some lessons. I don't know, but the point is, if you're doing a lot of marketing, but you haven't really ascertained that your work has commercial viability, that people really do want to buy it when you expose it to enough of them, then you've got the cart in front of the horse. So take a look at that. Maybe not you, Nancy, but other people, if you're in that same situation. It's one thing, if you do not address that, you're not being fair to yourself. And you could end up really frustrating yourself, spending a lot of time trying to market when that's not the problem.
Yeah, and that, that is such a, a tough question to answer, especially if you're trying to answer it about your own work, because obviously you can't be objective about the work that you're creating. And I think to supplement what Barney's saying, absolutely, it's a good idea to get some outside perspective. I do believe, we're fortunate to live in a very broad art market. There are buyers out there who are interested in a very wide range of work. And so it's not necessarily that what you're interested in or what it is that you're trying to create won't ever be sellable. But you may have to work harder to find the market for that work. Or as Barney's saying, maybe what your vision for your work needs to be further developed. But if the work is getting exposure, if you're showing it to hundreds or if it's being exposed to thousands of people in a venue where they could potentially be buying it, and you're not getting a reaction to it, just like Barney's saying, that's a clear sign that I've got to fix something here. Either I've got to improve the quality of what I'm doing, or increase the marketability of what I'm doing, or you may say, maybe I've been doing it all this time. I do it because I love doing it. Maybe I don't want to find a market for this work. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I believe in what I'm doing, and if the market's not there for it, I'm going to take that, put that as a secondary priority, and I'm just going to keep my focus on creating what I know I'm creating. And you look at some of the great artists of the last, of all time, really. And many of them have struggled to find a market for their work, but they've had a vision that they've believed in, and ultimately, Some few of them found a following for their work and have gone down in the history books. Of course, there are many more who have not had that happen. So it's it's a passion, and I'm convinced that if you have the passion and belief in your work, and you're willing to put in the work to improve your technique and style, and work at it and be persistent, that ultimately you can find a market. And I've gone on too long, but I'm going to throw one more thing out to Nancy, and that is that she mentioned that over the last 6 years, she's had $1,700 in sales. It should be noted that these last 6 years would be hard to use as any kind of benchmark for anyone, because sales have been hard for everyone over the last, really over the last 7 or 8 years. And so I would say that, we should also keep that in mind in thinking about, our level of frustration and discouragement. Maybe it's not just you, maybe it's also just the fact that it's been harder for everyone. And I've seen some very successful artists whose sales have dropped dramatically over the last 8 years. And now hopefully the market is coming back and things pick back up, and we get to see a more normal playing field again.
We could probably do the whole hour just on that, or some tangent one way or another on that topic. There's a Chinese proverb: when business is bad, paint the counter, and it also lends itself to having goals and clearly knowing what you want. And you just indicated that, Jason, by saying having a really pleasant hobby that you can make some money at is fine. That could be a goal. Not everybody has to be represented in 50 galleries and making $100,000 or more a year by being an artist. It's purely up to you. So, but having good goals and backing those up with actions that match the goals and are based on resources that you have available to you, that's how you begin to really build a good, solid business. And I wrote a blog post over the weekend and published it on Saturday about 3 things that successful artists do. And one of the points was Kaizen. It's a Japanese word for continuous improvement. And Jason, you mentioned that, and it just came to mind. I think if you work on continuous improvement, whether you're doing it for yourself or you want to really get better and make a lot of sales, if you have that as a mindset, something that you're actually mindful of doing, you're going to get better, and your results will come along as an outcome of you doing that, being mindful of Kaizen. I'll move along here to another question. This one comes from Barbara Ferrer. In the spirit of asking anything, I want you to know the last post really hurt a nerve. That was one that I was talking about where I don't want to get into the post. We'll be on forever. Anyway, she just said, mentioning the part when sales feel random, it feels like your marketing isn't systematic enough. That kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. Guilty as charged. Enough said. I've been working through this carefully to determine the course of action so I can go all out. The work I do is custom portraits. I also paint portraits that are part of a series, so I have a large set of examples. The work I would like to make my bread and butter is custom portraits. My portraits definitely capture likeness and have many classic qualities. However, they are much more modern in design. Based on my experience, people with a more entrepreneurial outlook are drawn to them and have commissioned me. In my opinion, my best style suits adults of all ages. If this were you, what would you do to find and approach customers in a systematic way? I'll start with, you said that your art appeals to people who are entrepreneurial in outlook, and then you also said that it appeals to adults of all ages. That's a really wide market, and that can get you in problems right there. If you're trying to market to too broad of a market, you'll never make a dent. It's just it's too expensive to do mass marketing. You need to dial in on something. You can always expand out, but there's a famous book called Positioning that was written back in the 80s about marketing, and positioning is nothing more than, if I say luxury car, you say
BMW.
Audi. There you go. Pardon me. BMW. How could I have said anything else, Jason, right? Or if you say soft drink, you say Coca-Cola. That's the top position. There's only room for one top position in each person's mind. And if you're all over the place with your marketing and you don't have it dialed in on who you are and who you want to who your best prospects are, you're going to waste your time and effort and be frustrated by it. So you're asking, how would you approach customers in a systematic way? I'd first start looking at people who are entrepreneurs, and then I'd start trying to figure out, even further dialing in on entrepreneurs, what kind of entrepreneurs? Are we talking about men or women or both? Are we talking about people who are doing in the tech industry or in the service industry? Or I would look at different ways to, however you can do, whatever you can do to narrow that down. One of the main concepts in that book, Positioning, was in order to broaden your market or broaden your sales, narrow your market. In other words, the tighter the focus you have on something, the more likely you are to be able to really make penetration in that market. If Jason has a kind of an eclectic contemporary look to his gallery, which offsets him from a lot of the people on Main Street there in Scottsdale, where it's one Western gallery after another. You go in his gallery and it's a breath of fresh air. He has carved out a niche of sorts there with that potential, with that look, and you kind of need to do the same thing. So having told you that, then I would say, okay, you've narrowed this down. Maybe you're looking for male entrepreneurs who are in the software business or in the internet marketing business or whatever the case. Well, then where do those people hang out? They're going to be they hang out online and in person in various places. That's where you really start need to do research. If you can figure out where they're at, what groups do they belong to on LinkedIn? Are they, if it's software guys, they're probably on Google Plus. They may be going to meetups locally. Like me, I belong to several WordPress meetup groups here in the Phoenix area. There's all kinds of different ways to find people. If it's higher end, maybe they belong to the Polo Club. Whatever it is, you need to find ways to begin to associate with them so that you can let them know about your art as a byproduct of the fact that you've established a relationship and become part of the same group that they are already hanging out in.
And Barney, the portraiture business is a particularly interesting one to me. More as a curiosity than as a marketing approach for my business. It's not something that it works very well from a gallery standpoint, especially where I get most of my traffic from out of town. But I've watched a lot of artists who work in that field, and what I've noticed them doing several things. One is that it seems that the single biggest driver of business is word of mouth. Somebody has had a portrait done of themselves or their family. They have friends over, they have colleagues over. And so, trying to build and exploit that is going to be one of the most important things that you can do. And I would encourage you to figure that out first. I know a lot of portrait artists will create a kind of a rack card or a postcard that they provide a small stack to each of their clients who have had a portrait done, so that the client can then give that card to someone who sees it and might be interested in it. And then as Barney says, just reaching out and trying to network and leverage, hey, you're very happy with the portrait that I just did for you. Do you have any friends or colleagues that you feel might benefit or might be interested in having a portrait done and might use it as, just trying to build that network out from your past customers. Boy, it's just so critical that you think about every angle there and try and leverage that those contacts that you already have. And I know I talked to one portrait artist out of Texas, and she told me that when she was starting in the business, she reached out to some VIPs in the community. And I'm not sure the exact mechanism she used, but she told them that they had been selected to have their portrait done by this artist, her. And she then did portraits for them. And again, I'm not sure exactly what the mechanism was. I'm not sure if she was basically using them as a marketing effort and not having them pay for the portrait, or if there was some monetary exchange. I like I said, I don't know exactly what happened, but she said then she was able to start leveraging those initial contacts to reach out to the community. So, be creative and just realize that as a portrait artist, you are going to really need to be a people person and be able to not be afraid to toot your own horn and ask people to toot your horn for you.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, I have a friend who does pet portraiture, and she has done some commissions, and the work has been hung in places where nonprofits for other types of pets, or for all kinds of different things, not just the Humane Society, but also for companion dogs and different things, where she's gotten her work in those organizations and then shown, and as a result of just being exposed, having her work exposed in an audience, or to an audience of people who would be inclined, she's gotten a lot of commission work, like you were talking about, word of mouth. I know you didn't say you were doing pet portraiture, so I was thinking maybe it's the local March of Dimes or the Kiwanis. I would really do the research to find out what group was most likely to be your best prospects, where most of your best prospects would be hanging out in one place, and offer to do a portrait of the current CEO, or current, maybe somebody else who's.
A lot of those organizations will do fundraisers where they'll have auctions or silent auctions, maybe offer, you can auction off a portrait to one of your donors and have it be a fundraiser for the organization, but also an opportunity for you to reach out.
It comes down to you've got to really put your creative hat on. You can't use all of your creativity for your art. You need to save a little bit so that you can spend it on your marketing, so that you can do something unique. There's a guy named Owen Garrett up in Edmonton, Alberta, who's making over $100,000 a year, and he's a pencil artist. There was a lot of oil derricks in the Alberta area in Canada, so he started doing drawings of the oil derricks, and then going to the oil companies and just walked in and cold called them, and he got it down to a system where he'd figure out who to ask for, or warm up the receptionist to find out, and he ended up just getting a whole program where he has a gift program with a lot of these companies, because he just built a relationship with them. But he just took the bull by the horns and had a cold calling methodology of doing this, and has built a very profitable business for himself as a result. So it just comes down to, he had some creative ideas of how to do something, and he knew where his niche was and really hammered home on it. It's panned out very well for Owen.
I've got a question, and this one I think I've only got a last name. It's Ballard. And she says, just got some representation from a few out-of-state galleries. So first of all, congratulations on that. Can you give me a guide as to how often you should check in with these galleries? You want to show your enthusiasm, but don't want to be needy or high maintenance. Am I right? What's the trick? And I think, it's a great question. And I certainly have the whole range of artists that I work with in my gallery, from those that I never hear from. Literally, I have to track them down and send out a posse to get a message to them, the real hermits, to artists who are on the other end of the spectrum and are contacting me more frequently and maybe are a little bit more difficult to communicate with, or maybe are more insistent. And my suggestion is that you want to be somewhere in the middle ground, that you want to project a message to your galleries that you're here to be helpful, to provide them with the service that they need, but you're not trying to invade or encroach on their busy schedules, and that you're not high maintenance in that way. And so I suggest, and I wrote this in my book, Starving to Successful, that once every 6 to 8 weeks is about a nice even mix of calling up and contacting your galleries, and just keep those contacts low key. I'm just calling to find out if there's any way I can be of service. Not, hey, have you guys sold anything lately, or what's going on? That kind of call, but just touching base. Is there anything you need from me? Is there anything that I can do from you? Do you need new inventory? And then the other key, and I think this is a great conversation to have early in a relationship with a gallery, is just ask them, how frequently would you like me to be in touch? What level of communication would you like? And just try and get a sense of that from them. But if you can kind of couch your communication in a service-oriented way, it's going to be by far the most successful. And I'll be honest with you, it's the artists who are in that middle ground, who've found the right balance of communication, that tend to get better exposure in the gallery. If you're contacting me from time to time, you're going to be on my mind. And when I'm thinking about how I'm going to rearrange the gallery, maybe your work is going to get chosen to be in a more prominent space because we've been in contact. If you're contacting me too much and coming in on the irritating side of the equation, the opposite may happen. So, try and exactly. So, just be a little bit careful and sensitive of a gallery owner's time, and keep your communication brief. And maybe it's not a call every time. Maybe it's an email. And just keep the communication channels open, but don't be overbearing.
I found this in my relative limited experience compared to your many years. I have worked in 2 separate galleries in Scottsdale over my career, and long enough to take the calls from artists who were calling in to find out what's going on. And I found it myself personally, and I observed it in the gallery owners, that the artists who had a kind of an upbeat attitude, who weren't calling with grinding, like Jason was saying, away with where's the questions, how many people have come in, have you shown my art, or whatever, but were being friendly and open, and actually had a conversation with you and treated you like you were important to them, but that they weren't being overbearing. Those calls were pleasant to take, and it was usually fun to talk to. In fact, I found that talking to those kind of artists, I would want to ask them questions about their art so that I could learn a little bit more. When I had the opportunity to sell it, I could say, I was talking to Bill the other day about something, and blah, blah, blah. This is the way he paints rocks, or whatever the case might be. It would help me be a better salesperson. But it had to happen because I wanted to have a conversation with the artist, and that artist had to start off with good intent and just be personable and friendly. So keep that in mind, however often you call. Put a smile on your face before you make the call. I think the next one's on me. Am I right here, Jason?
If you've got one, you've got it.
Okay. This is from Tiani Matis. She has a question about the best art biz software to manage your business. Any suggestions, easy to learn or manage? She didn't give us a whole lot on that in terms of
which part of your business.
Yeah, what you're looking for, because Tiani, there are software programs out there that help you manage your inventory, and then there's software programs that are more marketing based, and some that are kind of in the middle. And I know this is a little bit of
and bookkeeping, and
that's true too. This is a little bit of a touchy subject for Jason, because he also has a program called ArtSala, which is actually quite good. And I
have a conflict of interest in answering this question.
He does. And here's my take on it is I don't deal with any vendors who sell it, and I don't know enough artists who've actually talked to me about it to make a qualified answer on it. I think, much as I'd like to be able to tell you, I would tell you to look at ArtSala. Here's the bottom line, and this holds true for almost anything that you're going to do with regard to your art business or anything else. If you're going to invest money into something and it looks not only money but time, your time could be just as valuable. If you're going to actually get married and that's kind of what you're doing when you buy a software program that's going to run your business, want some part of your business, you're saying, okay, I'm going to be with this program for a good long while. That's my intention anyway. The only way to come out of that ahead is to start by doing the research to begin with, which you've done here, Tiani, by asking the question here. Unfortunately, I think it's probably not the greatest forum for it. I'd look at wetcanvas.com has an internet business and also a general business forum where artists are very active and answer lots of questions. And of course, there are also artist groups on Facebook and LinkedIn where you can ask those kind of questions and get a variety of answers from people who are actually using the software.
And even though I have a vested interest in the topic, I would 100% agree with that. We created ArtSala with very specific purpose in mind. We created it for artists who are working to show with galleries and need to keep track of their inventory, or who are selling direct to their clients and need a good way to not only keep track of the inventory, but to generate invoices and those kind of things. But even though we created something that we feel does a great job of all of that, I instantly recognize that every artist has different needs and may find a solution that works better for them. So I'll just echo what Barney said. Talk to other artists that you network with, whether it's online, as Barney mentioned, or in your art groups that you're a member of, and ask what they're using to keep track of their inventory. But what I will say is it's a good question to ask, and it's one that you want to answer early on in your art business. Because you want, not only, as Barney said, you want to find exactly the right one for you, but you also want to be getting in the habit of being very organized. And I've seen this time and again. The artists that I work with who tend to be the most successful are not, sure, talent helps and creating great artwork helps, but I've also noticed that the successful ones are the ones who found a good system to be organized about keeping track of their inventory, keeping track of their expenses, being systematic about their marketing. And so I would make that a high priority early on in your art career to get a good system in place that you can then kind of put into cruise control as you move forward, so you're just in the habit of keeping that information up to date. Now, I've got a question, or did I take?
No, that was mine, so go ahead.
And we're, again, quickly running out of time.
How did that happen?
It happens, but this one comes from, I've got the first initial G in Johnson as the last name, and says, I've talked to Trailside Galleries and Legacy Gallery, and for those of you who don't know, this must be an Arizona artist, I'm assuming, because those are two monolithic galleries here in Arizona, Western galleries and traditional art galleries. But he says, he or she, I guess I should say, says that both agree that it may take another 10 years for the art market to come back. I paint representational art, mainly wildlife and landscape images, and I'm an established artist with over 20 years in the business. Many of the national shows have disappeared, and the ones still above water are struggling. With the loss of income from galleries and shows, what advice would you give to generate income? Boy, and I want to say a couple of things here. And Barney, I know you're going to have some really good suggestions here too. But what I'm afraid of, and from the question we had earlier from Nancy and some of the other questions I'm seeing here, is that it's pretty easy to get caught up into a spiraling mindset that, you know, the world is ending, the sky is falling, art isn't selling, galleries are disappearing, artists are starving. And certainly, I don't want to minimize the challenges and difficulties that are out there for the market. But I also see some amazing opportunities, and I see that the market is on the upswing. We just had we're still in our season, but we're coming to the tail end of this season. We had our best season for art sales, for sure the best season that we've had since pre-recession, so since 2006, 2007. But I think when we get to the end of the season, it may end up being our best season that we have ever had. And as I'm talking to artists that I work with and other artists around the country, I'm hearing a lot of good news and a lot of upbeat artists about sales. And so I would be careful about, you can always find the naysayers and the negativity, and it's pretty easy to get caught up in that, to start to believe it. And my thought about that is that, why do that? What good does that do? Unless you're saying, I'm going to get out of the art market and I'm going to go work, in some corporation somewhere. I just don't think that it does any good to have that kind of attitude. And instead, I'd say, yes, the art market is difficult, and maybe it's hard to find, or harder to find business than it used to be for me. But as we talked about earlier, I would keep at it. I'd be persistent, and I would change things up, try something new. If your galleries that you're currently in aren't selling the work the way it used to, it's time to go out and find some different galleries, or start doing some direct marketing, and building a direct collector base. Again, it's the artists who are working hard and being persistent that are going to find the success, and that's where the opportunity is right now. If the market has been down, there's some pent-up demand, but there's also been some artists who've gotten out of the market, and so I would encourage you to take advantage of that and work towards building your success.
All good, wise words of advice. If you're really feeling beat up about it, you need to go get the book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's an excellent book for anybody who's been displaced or disgruntled by life dealing them a bad hand. Or maybe you've been sitting at the poker table and for 4 hours and you haven't had a hand you want to bet on. That doesn't mean that for the next 4 hours it's going to be that way. It just means that was what happened to you then. But I had to read that book myself when I saw the magazine business that had served me quite well for decades, where I earned a very nice income, all of a sudden just disappearing right in front of my eyes, basically. It can happen to you. What you have to do is pick yourself up and say, okay, things are different. What am I going to do about it? And I'll give a little bit of a commercial here for myself. If you see the x.co/art buyers, that's a shortcut that you can put in your browser that'll take you to a 90-minute webinar where you can watch my 8 steps to art marketing mastery workshop, which is built around the book that I wrote a couple of years ago called Guerrilla Marketing for Artists, how 100 collectors can bulletproof your career. And that's what I'm trying to get to with this point. And that is, if you today, because of the internet, with email marketing and blogging and the change in consumer habits in terms of being much more willing and open to buy directly from buyers, all those things lend themselves to a new dynamic that weren't there, new dynamics that weren't there just a few years ago for artists. So if you start harnessing those things and going after collectors directly, the more that you can build your own collector base, instead of a gallery base, but have your own collector base, still work with galleries or other distribution channels, that's fantastic. But if you've got 100 or more collectors buying your work directly, they're going to probably buy 3 to 5 pieces from you. Most artists don't make more than 1,000 or 1,500 pieces in a lifetime. If you've got 100 collectors and they buy even 3 pieces, that's a third, 20 to 30% or more of your entire collection sold to those people. And they don't go away when Facebook fades, when the galleries go out of business, when other things happen to your other distribution channels. That you have built a direct one-on-one relationship with people, and if you treat them right, they're going to do 2 things. They're going to continue to buy art from you, and they will refer you to other people who will buy your art. And some of them will be magnanimous or just influential and have contacts and tip you off that there's a hotel being built in town, and I think your art would be fantastic for it, or whatever the case might be. Something completely that you'd never thought would happen to you will come as a result of you having a direct relationship with collectors that you won't get in any other way. So that's what I would tell you to do. If you find yourself in that position where you're just not getting the sales that you want, or things aren't the same as they used to be, then start thinking about, how do I begin to build a collector base? I don't think there's anything more powerful than an artist can do for herself or himself today than that. Work on that, and then work on building out your gallery relationships and everything else. You'll be fine if you do. And we're out of
Barney,
time.
we've done it again. We burned through an hour and only gotten to a fraction of the questions. But be assured, either we will get to these questions in a future session, or often, I know I certainly have done this, and Barney, you probably have as well. These questions kind of go into the mill and kind of roll around and end up being a blog post, or we may be able to respond to you directly. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this broadcast. Thanks for your great questions. And as always, it's great to spend some time with you, and we'll look forward to seeing you on both of our blogs in future broadcasts as well.
We'll be here next time on the second Tuesday of May.
Second Tuesday of May.
Now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. Peace out.
All right. Thanks, Barney. It's always good to be with you.
Jason.
Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.
Bye.